What's going on, boys and girls, and welcome back to Nth Level Entertainment, the most awesome geek and car culture YouTube channel in South Africa. I am your host, Whassup, and welcome back to my 50 Greatest Films Ever Made review series by IMDb. And today we're having a look at The Pianist. Now, The Pianist is it's the second Jewish Holocaust film on the list of 50 Greatest Films Ever Made series that I'm doing at the moment. The first was Schindler's List, starring Liam Neeson, and the second is this one. And The Pianist is directed by Roman Polanski and stars Adrian Brody, who actually later went on to win an Oscar for Best Actor in this film. And Roman Polanski apparently himself is a Holocaust survivor. Apparently he lost his mother in the gas chambers in the concentration camps during World War II. And which I guess makes him an ideal fit as a director to helm this project. So basically, The Pianist follows the story of the character played by Adrian Brody. It's based on a true story. He was a pianist in Poland, and it starts off when the character's name, his last name is Spielman. I'll put the name up on the screen now. I don't want to butcher it myself. But it basically follows the journey of him during the time when the German invasion started in Poland. He was working as a musician at a radio station. He basically was the musical entertainment during the radio station. And at one of the days of him at work was when the bombing started, because we actually saw how it affected the people in the station itself. There was shrapnel everywhere, windows were blowing out, and that's basically where the film starts. The character's journey into the struggles that he'd basically be facing. So it's basically a social commentary film, and I guess historical, in the sense that it's based on real events, and it was highlighting the suffering that Jewish people went through during the time of German invasion and the beginning of World War II and the starting up of the concentration camps. Tonally, it reminded me a lot of the opening film of the first X-Men movie back in 2000, as well as X-Men First Class, where we see a young Magneto who himself is Jewish during the time of the Holocaust, being separated from his parents when his powers manifested. So that small scene in those movies is basically this entire movie, but expanded, of course. And we saw a lot of how Jewish people were senselessly and violently murdered at the hands of German soldiers, how they were persecuted and shoved out of their homes. There's a scene where Adrian Brody, I'm just going to keep calling him Adrian Brody for now, and his family were in their very spacious apartment in Poland, looking across the street to see another family being prosecuted in the apartment opposite theirs. And an old Jewish man in a wheelchair is actually pushed off of a balcony onto the street. And of course he died. So in that scene, that's where we are basically, tonally primed as to the kind of tone you're going to be experiencing throughout the film, the kind of visceral grittiness you're going to be experiencing. And throughout the film, we see a lot more of that senseless killing happening in front of us. So as much as it was about what happened in World War II, it was centered around the perception of this pianist, as he was actually surviving the situation himself. We saw him, move with his family to a smaller apartment. We saw them taking refuge with friends who somehow had connections that kept them protected, only for a little while though. And we saw him eventually wandering by himself after having escaped several of these concentration camps and just trying to find refuge in abandoned houses and houses that were already, bombed and were just barely standing. He would take refuge there thinking that, German soldiers wouldn't be searching those houses again. We would see him hunting down for scraps of food and water just to survive. He was brought down to a level where in one scene we even saw him drinking dirty water from a bucket that was just left standing. And as far as this, his character development as well, we saw a lot in terms of how he went from being a respected musician, that had a career and had the respect of his peers, to being someone who's just basically trying to stay alive and accepting much, much lower levels of survival than he's used to. There was a time when he found refuge with some people who locked him in a room and asked him to keep quiet because no one was there, and the room had a piano in it, and he obviously couldn't play it because he had to keep quiet. And what he did, maybe I guess to grasp onto some semblance of normalcy, is he opened the piano and then he sort of hovered his hands just a few inches above the keys and simulated the movement of playing the piano. And through the movie we hear the notes in his head, in his imagination. And we see him do this several times later in the film again. Whenever he finds himself alone in an abandoned house trying to survive, he'd just be doing that on his lap, and we hear the notes in his head. And I'm guessing that was some way of him trying to maintain his sanity. And the scene where that's most impactful is when, towards the end of the film, he's discovered by a German soldier who then asks him several questions as to why are you here, how did you get here, do you work here? And then he asked him what he does for a living, and he told him that I'm a pianist. And there just happened to be a piano in the other room in that same house. And he said, well, play for me. And when he did, it was a very powerful scene because, the emotion and passion that he acted that scene with was almost as though he was playing his life story in a way, as far as all of the events he suffered up until that point. And he was artistically expressing his trauma, his hope, his, everything he was feeling, and it seemed to actually get through to the soldier. The quote that popped into my mind in that moment was, and music doth soothe the savage beast. Because, the German soldier then took pity on him, he let him go, and eventually he brought food for him and things like that, told him that the war will be over soon, he just needs to hold on for a couple of weeks, and he even gave him the coat off of his back to keep him warm during that winter. So it was very much a story of the triumph of the human spirit, because at the very end of the film, we see Adrian Brody get back on his feet and get back to his career. He's playing for the radio station again. But, unfortunately, in my eyes, we later see how when the war was over, there was now concentration camps that contained German soldiers as prisoners, and how the Jewish people that were previously victims were just hurling insults and abuse at them, telling them about everything they had lost, that they had taken away, they were calling them names. And what then eventually happened is that same soldier who actually rescued Adrian Brody ended up dying in a concentration camp later. So it was a very inspiring film as far as that's concerned. If you guys have seen the film, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of it. There was a lot of philosophical lessons that I think came from this film. Like I said just now, triumph of the human spirit. Another one that I interpreted when watching it was how philosophers will talk about things like your life purpose literally saving your life in certain ways, because that's what music did for him when that soldier discovered him. And basically resilience and hope, against adversity, and courage, the willingness to survive, the tenacity to do what it takes to eventually reach the end of the rainbow, I guess. I don't work at Cardi, so please don't criticize my anecdotes. But yeah, look, it was a great film. That'll conclude my review. Please let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. I personally feel that it definitely does deserve its place amongst the 50 greatest films of all time. And as usual, people, I have been Zwelethu Mahlangu. Thank you for hanging out with me. Take care of each other. Stay awesome. Stay chasing your dreams to infinity and beyond.